Hey guys! Tonight we start with something even more unexpectedly intimate than counting sheep, the surprisingly medical world of medieval barbers. Listen close as the lantern flickers, and you find yourself leaning in, blade in hand, on a dusty wood stool, toes dangling above a straw-strewn floor. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments so we can all drift off together from every corner of the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in a crowded town square somewhere in 12th century Europe. Villagers mill about, carts creak, and the scent of roasting chestnuts mingles with freshly churned manure. Between a blacksmith's hammering and a baker's hot oven, there stands an unassuming wooden stall, your barber's shop. But you're not just here for a quick trim or a precise beard line, you're here because the local doctor is miles away, and when bodily humors go awry, it's the barber who doubles as surgeon and dentist. In a world where medicine and grooming share the same stool, you learn fast that pulling a rogue hair can require the same steady hand as extracting a rotten tooth. You start by tracing your lineage back to ancient Rome, where barbers, or tonsors, clipped hair as part of public bathing rituals. Over centuries, as the clergy forbade churchmen from bleeding patients, local craftsmen picked up the bloody torch. By the time you set up shop beneath the fluttering pennants of a medieval fair, your family's knack for razor-sharp precision has morphed into wielding knives, bloodletting cups, and lancets. Historians still argue whether early barber surgeons borrowed techniques from itinerant monks or from Moorish healers across the Pyrenees, but you know you carry skills that blur the line between grooming and bleeding. Your stall bristles with a curious mix of tools, gleaming shears perched beside tarnished amputation saws. Each instrument nestled in a leather roll you've inherited. You'll learn soon enough that no two customers come for the same service. A noblewoman may demand a gentle chin shave, while the blacksmith next door limps in begging for draining a swollen abscess. As the sun edges higher, you secure a thick leather apron around your waist, both to protect your linen doublet and to catch stray droplets that would make a modern hygienist cringe. You run your hand over the wooden counter, feeling its grooves worn smooth by centuries of elbow rests. Behind this counter, you've inherited more than a family trade, you've inherited an entire social role. The parish priest won't bleed his flock, and the town healer's herb garden is miles off, so you become the de facto health practitioner. Your reputation grows with each cautious slice of skin and each whispered reassurance, just a pinch now, and the humors will be balanced. In this world obsessed with bodily fluids, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, your promise to draw out excess life force is worth more than gold coins. As midday approaches, customers wander in, some clutching swollen temples hoping for relief, others craving a new hairstyle to impress at the manor balls. You greet them with a curt nod and a practiced smile, your voice a low murmur meant to soothe jittery nerves. Your stool creaks as you adjust your stance, and you feel the familiar pulse of adrenaline when someone requests a tooth extraction. A quick yank behind a curtain of musty linen, and you reveal steel pincers that glint under torchlight. One false move, and you risk more than a crooked smile, you risk the guild's ire or a trip to the gallows. Speaking of the guild, you'll soon register its looming presence. You owe dues. Attend monthly meetings, and answer to the master barber surgeon whose decrees shape your day. You learn to navigate the fine line between autonomy and strict regulation, too few fees, and you'll be fined, too many deaths under your watch, and you might hang alongside a convicted thief. In guild records, your name appears alongside tales of apprentices who nicked an artery or spilled a skull's worth of brain matter. Yet here you are, edging closer to that proud tradition, ready to add your own story to the annals of barber surgeons past. The world beyond your shop bleeds together, the scents of herbs you'll someday mix, the metallic tang of blood, the hushed prayers of those too frightened to scream. Each morning you set up your razor-sharp tools and open a leather-bound manual detailing regional variations of phlebotomy. By afternoon, you're gleefully cleaning up after a session, though gleefully might be too strong, perhaps relieved suits it better. And though townsfolk sometimes whisper of calls to banish you to the edges of medicine, for now you stand at the crossroads of haircutting and healing, an essential figure in a world that won't survive long without your curious expertise. As twilight settles, you look back on your path, from clipping hair at your father's side, to mastering the art of opening veins without collapsing the patient, to understanding that every snip draws you closer to both respect and revulsion. By tracing these origins, you see how a simple barber's stool transformed into a surgeon's altar, one sharp tool at a time. You're barely out of your teens when the guild takes you in, though taking in is perhaps a generous term. What they really do is let you sweep hair, stoke the coals, and watch with wide-eyed dread as your master carves into yet another man's thigh. Training under a guild is less like school and more like surviving an endless apprenticeship of sweat, patience, and politely nodding while someone explains for the 7th time how to sharpen a razor against a leather strop. Your day starts early. Before the sun has even bothered to clear the horizon, you're hauling buckets of water from the town well. You splash some into a basin to heat over the brazier, careful not to burn the bottom like yesterday. That earned a clout to the ear. Then, with the steam curling up like a ghost, you begin sharpening the tools. Every edge must be keen, every handle oiled, every pincer free of the bloodstains you failed to scrub out yesterday. The master has a nose for rust and a mood that sours faster than milk. Training is hands-on from day one, just not the glamorous kind. You're taught how to fold bandages, how to recognize clean wool from reused scraps, and, importantly, how to keep still when your master practices leech placement on your forearm. It's not about cruelty, he says, just tradition, and the leeches are hungry anyway. You hold back a flinch and nod. You're not allowed to perform any cutting work for your first few months. Instead, you observe. You stand in the corner, memorizing the pattern of movements during a bloodletting, where the bowl goes, how the patient is seated, when to murmur encouragement and when to press down hard. You learn that it's not just about skill, it's about rhythm. A good barber moves like a dancer, precise, measured, and above all, calm. Panic belongs to the patients. You're the rock they cling to as the world drains out of them, drop by carefully calculated drop. There's book learning too, in a way. The guild keeps a few dog-eared tomes locked in a chest. They're mostly collections of earlier writings, Hippocrates, Galen, maybe even a smudged translation of an Arabic text if your master is particularly progressive. You're encouraged to read them by candlelight, though it's clear that practical experience trumps theory. The books teach you what humors are, but only blood on your own apron teaches you how it smells when someone hasn't eaten in 2 days. Spoiler, sour, like old iron soaked in stew, the guild is a brotherhood of sorts, though not always a friendly one. Every few weeks, you're marched across the square to the hall for check-ins. There, masters size up apprentices, swap horror stories, and nod gravely at the latest regulations. 1 month it's stricter fines for unsanitary instruments, the next, it's a ban on street shaving after sunset, too many accidents, they say, and not enough moonlight. You learn to nod a lot. Nod, and keep your questions for your pillow, but beneath the strict supervision, there's camaraderie. You and the other apprentices meet after dusk behind the dye merchant's stall, where you swap stories about patients who screamed like goats or nobles who demanded hot towels scented with crushed lavender. You practice your suturing on pigskin, complain about blisters, and try to forget the bucket of pulled teeth you spilled last week that earned you 3 extra hours of cleanup. And your master? He's gruff, sure, but he teaches you. Sometimes, after a good day when no one fainted and no one died, he'll sit with you on the step and pass you a crust of bread and a cup of thin ale. He'll talk about the time he stitched a bishop's cheek after a carriage accident, or how once, in a siege, he performed 15 amputations in a single day. You listen, imagining the blood, the tension, and the strange pride in keeping someone alive with nothing but rags, hot knives, and sheer willpower. Eventually, you graduate from watching to doing. Your first task. A shave. Not glamorous, but terrifying nonetheless. The man has a thick black beard and an eye that doesn't blink. You lather his chin with trembling fingers, hands slick with your own sweat, blade poised like a question. You make the first pass slowly, carefully, and when you finish, the man nods in approval. No nicks, no complaints. Your master grunts. Progress, then come the bandagings, the leech placements, and, finally, the small cuts. You get to open a vein under supervision. Your hand shakes, but not too much. The bowl clinks softly as the first drops of blood patter inside. It's a rite of passage. From here on, you're a real apprentice, no longer just a glorified towel wringer. The guild will still keep you on a tight leash for years. You'll have to present cases, undergo inspections, and pass the inevitable test, a mock surgery with judges peering over their spectacles, murmuring about wrist angles and blood flow. But for now, you've stepped onto the path, scissors in hand, and behind you, the sound of footsteps, other apprentices following in your trail of clippings and crimson. You finish the day sweeping up the curls of someone's beard and bits of stained linen. Your arms ache, your knuckles are raw, but you tuck your tools away with something close to satisfaction. You're learning. And one day, they'll call you Master, too. You rise before the crows. It's cold, the kind of damp chill that seeps through your straw mattress and clings to your joints like a second skin. The fire has long gone out, and your boots feel stiff as wood as you tug them on. Another day in the shop, another parade of ailments, bad haircuts, and questionable bodily fluids. You sigh, stretch, and begin the ritual of setting up your humble domain. The shop is little more than a timber-framed corner tucked between the apothecary and the cobbler. The wooden beams overhead creak in protest as you push open the shutters. A thin fog clings to the street like a hungover ghost. You open the front flaps wide enough to show you're open for business. Then light a tallow candle for the back table. The flicker dances across your tools, scissors, razors, a blood bowl, forceps, leech jars. Each item has its place. Each item is clean, well, wiped may be the better word, and arranged with obsessive precision. You start with the most basic of tasks, sweeping. Hair curls are everywhere. Yesterday, a man with a beard like a bramble bush had come in and demanded to be made presentable for courting. He left looking like he'd fought a lawnmower. The clippings pile up underfoot like brown snowdrifts. You gather them with a rough broom made from bound twigs and shove them toward the back, where they'll be fed to the pigs or swept into the river. You're not paid for cleanliness, but there's a rhythm to the work that calms you. As the sun climbs higher, you begin preparing the soap mixture. Lard, ash, and rainwater stirred together in a copper pot. It smells like regret, but it gets the job done. You heat the mixture gently and pour it into a clay bowl, where it will sit beside your strop and warm towels, waiting for your first client. And here he comes, old Thomas, the miller with the world's most erratic beard line. He grumbles about taxes, gout, and the local friar as you nod along, gently working up a lather with your badger hair brush. You tilt his head back, and for a moment, he looks like royalty. Then you draw the blade down his cheek, smooth and even, and listen to his breathing slow. That's the thing no one tells you about barbering, it's intimate. Your clients relax, confide, sometimes cry. You're their confessor, their gossip mill, their quick dose of medical relief. Next up, a young woman with a split scalp. Her brother got rough during a scuffle over dinner. She laughs it off, but you can see the wince in her eyes. You gently dab the cut, rinse it with wine, your only disinfectant, and sew it closed with coarse linen thread. It's not pretty, but it will heal. She thanks you, presses a single copper coin into your palm, and hurries out, head covered in a borrowed scarf. Then there's the nobleman's servant, sent in for a tidy-up. You straighten his fringe, trim his eyebrows, and pluck a handful of gray hairs he swears are stress-related. He doesn't tip, but you don't expect it. Instead, he promises to mention you to the master, which usually means absolutely nothing but makes him feel generous. You grab a quick bite, stale bread and an apple bruised on one side, and try not to notice that your fingers still smell faintly of blood. You chew slowly, watching passers-by. Children skip over puddles. A drunk slumps against a barrel. Somewhere, a merchant hawks oranges like they're gold nuggets. But here, inside your narrow slice of the world, time moves with the scrape of your blade. The afternoon brings a steady stream of humanity. A priest needing a trim before Sunday Mass. A farmer with a boil on his back that needs lancing. A boy with head lice so determined, they deserve a heraldic crest of their own. You do what you can. You trim, you lance, you nod sympathetically. You never say no, even when you want to. Saying no means they go elsewhere, and if they live, your reputation dies. By early evening, your hands ache. Your back feels like it's been attacked by a mallet. But the day isn't over. You mop the floor with a rag soaked in stale ale. You rinse the blood bowls, though the stains remain like whispers. You soak your razors in the wine bucket, scrub them with a wire brush, and hang them to dry by the hearth. Then you sort the leeches. Some are fat with blood and must be gently coaxed back into their jar. You drop in a bit of damp moss to keep them alive. Others have shriveled, useless after 1 or 2 uses. You'll bury those by the riverbank tonight. Maybe say a few words. If you're feeling sentimental, you record the day's earnings, for silver coins, 8 coppers, and a hunk of cheese from the farmer who swore it cured coughs. You note it all in the small ledger your master insists on, the pages stained with fingerprints and ink smears. It's tedious, but necessary. If the guild audits you and finds inconsistencies, they'll fine you, or worse, declare your license under review. Which is code for your one bad haircut from unemployment. Finally, just as you're closing shop, an old woman hobbles in. She's nearly blind and reeks of garlic and damp wool. She asks you to shave her head, says the lice are too much. You hesitate. Not because of the lice, but because it's late. But you nod, help her into the chair, and begin gently snipping away her brittle gray locks. She hums a tune from your childhood. You don't remember the words, but the melody settles over you like a blanket. When she's gone, you bolt the door and rest your hands on the worn counter. Your tools are clean. Your towel pile is folded. And for today, no one bled out, no one fainted, and no one accused you of witchcraft. That's about as good as it gets. When she's gone, you bolt the door and rest your hands on the worn counter. Your tools are clean. Your towel pile is folded. And for today, no one bled out, no one fainted, and no one accused you of witchcraft. You don't just cut hair and poke veins. No, you're also a one-stop shop for problems people can't, or won't, bring to a physician. Because while physicians sit in university halls arguing about Aristotle and bile, you're out here with your sleeves rolled up, actually fixing things. At least, that's what you tell yourself when someone limps in and drops their trousers without so much as a good morning. Take today, for example. A traveler staggers into your shop holding his own ear. Not figuratively, literally. A slice from a bar brawl, he says. You blink. The ear is still warm. You nod, motion him to the chair, and do your best. It's not your first reattachment job, though you privately doubt any of them worked. But with some wax thread, a steady hand, and enough wine to keep him biting down on his own belt, you stitch it back like it was never flapping in the wind. Well, almost. Then there are boils. Oh, the boils. You've seen them on every imaginable body part. And you're the man to lance them, drain them, and try not to gag while doing it. You heat your knife over a flame, clean it, if a quick dunk in wine counts as cleaning, and go in at a gentle angle. It's an art form. Too shallow, and it refills. Too deep, and you risk bleeding them like a stuck pig. You wrap the wound, murmur something soothing, and remind them not to pick at it. They always pick at it. Some days, it's teeth. Rotting teeth. Screaming, kicking, regretting their life choices teeth. You've got the tools, a pelican, shaped like a bird's beak, ironically, a tooth key, and your own bare knuckles when someone thrashes mid-extraction. No one likes this part. Not them, not you. But tooth pain drives even the proudest knight to weep like a babe, and when they beg for relief, you're their unlikely hero. One hard twist, a horrible crunch, and out comes the offending molar, roots and all. Blood spurts, you plug it with a wad of linen, and they stagger away dazed but grateful, and then there's the urinal consultation. A man might swagger into your shop asking for a haircut, but 10 minutes later, he's whispering about how his water smells like sulfur. You nod like a scholar. You pull out the glass flask. He deposits his offering discreetly, and you study it in the light, color, clarity, scent, sometimes even taste. Yes, taste. It's part of the job, according to the old texts, though you've perfected the art of pretending to sip when necessary. You give your assessment, too much heat in the liver, probably. Recommend fewer sausages, more mint, sometimes, people come in asking for powders. Love potions. Tonic for hair loss. A cure for embarrassing afflictions they won't name but pantomime awkwardly. You have a little drawer for such things. Chalk powder mixed with rosemary. Vial of goose grease. Ground up beetles, if you're feeling bold. They don't always work, but the placebo is strong when wrapped in mystery and whispered assurances. You also remove lice. Constantly. Especially in children. You mix vinegar and ashes, rub it into the scalp, and start combing. It's tedious, like weeding a garden made of scalp and sadness. The kids squirm, mothers fret, and you offer occasional bribes in the form of barley sweets. You finish with a rinse of lukewarm beer, not because it's effective, but because it makes the parents feel like they're doing something luxurious. And of course, there's bloodletting. Still your most requested service. People believe their humors are clogged like a medieval drainpipe, and it's your job to flush it all out. You tie a band tightly above the elbow, press a thumb against a pulsing vein, and open it cleanly with your lancet. The blood trickles into the bowl, and you time it by feel. Too little and it's a wasted effort, too much and they'll faint into your lap. You've learned to watch the color of their lips, the roll of their eyes, the shift in their weight. You talk softly throughout, distracting them with questions about their crops, their children, the latest sermon. When you're done, you wrap the arm in a clean cloth. Press a few coins from their trembling hand, and offer them a moment to sit before they stagger out into the daylight. You don't always feel proud of this work. Sometimes it feels like guesswork and hunches dressed up in fancy language. Sometimes you dream of your tools rising up in protest, the scissors snapping shut on your fingers, the leeches spelling out doctor in leech script. But mostly, you do what you can, with what you've got, where you are. And the people come back. Limping, bleeding, smiling through cracked teeth, but back. And just when you think the day's done, someone comes in holding a chicken. She won't lay, they say. Can you help? You blink. Then you nod. You have no idea what to do. But you've got vinegar, and time, and the confidence of someone who's reattached a man's ear with upholstery thread. So you place your hands on the bird, close your eyes, and murmur something vaguely Latin sounding. The customer leaves satisfied. And maybe, just maybe, the chicken will lay tomorrow. There's a special kind of joy, and by joy, of course, you mean dread, that comes from a noble knocking on your shop door. Not knocking, exactly. More like sending a servant to announce that His Grace would like your services. Which is code for, clean me up, patch me up, and don't you dare mess up my hairline or I'll have your hands removed. Noble clients are different. The common folk bring coin if they have it, barter if they don't. Nobles bring expectations, egos, and the faint aroma of saffron soap. You can't say no, either. Refusing a noble is like refusing gravity. You might not believe in it, but it will absolutely drag you down eventually. Today's noble is Sir Odo of, something long and French sounding. He doesn't sit, he lounges, all silk and smugness, while you prep your tools like you're about to carve a roast. He wants his beard styled in the Burgundian fashion, which, as far as you can tell, means he's seen a tapestry and now expects you to replicate it in 3 dimensions on his chin. You nod and pretend you've done this a dozen times. You haven't. But the key to working with nobles is confidence. And flattery. Lots of flattery. You lather him with trembling hands. The blade skates over his jaw, and you hold your breath on the tricky bits near his throat. He hums something tuneless, clearly imagining himself in a courtly painting. One wrong move, and it's not just a nick, it's a scandal. Possibly a duel. Historians still argue whether a minor cut in 1328 sparked a 3-month feud between 2 earls over who had the shakier barber. Then there's the noblewomen. They don't come to your shop, of course. No, you're summoned to them, inside the stone walls, beyond the tapestries, where everything smells like rose oil and tension. They want scalp massages, eyebrow shaping, and spot removal. That means you're dabbing crushed herbs onto pimples with the delicacy of a man disarming a landmine. One lady asked you to pluck every visible hair from her arms. You did. It took 3 hours and left your fingers feeling like wilted sausages. What makes noble clients so special, beyond their ability to ruin your life, is the way they view you. Not as a person, exactly. More like a particularly useful piece of furniture that occasionally talks back. You're their barber, which is flattering until you realize that means being on call at odd hours for nosebleeds, love bite cover-ups, and one memorable instance involving a misplaced brooch and a very red ear canal. You've also been asked to diagnose illnesses. A baron's daughter once fainted after spinning in a circle too many times. You were summoned immediately, as if the plague itself had arrived via pirouette. You examined her, pulse steady, color good, no signs of demon possession. You declared it an imbalance of vapors, which sounded appropriately serious. They gave you a gold coin. She was dancing again by evening. Some nobles genuinely try to be kind. Sir Auric the Old offers you mulled wine when you visit. Though he insists on telling you the same story about how his uncle lost a toe in the Crusades. Every single time. You've nodded through that tale so many times you could recite it in Latin. Then there are the ones with secrets. You've been sworn to silence more times than you can count. You've helped conceal bruises, abscesses, and questionable tattoos. You've faked reports of illness to delay marriages and whispered remedies to boost fertility, though you suspect most of them were just sheep's milk and positive thinking, but your most surreal noble request. One winter morning, a messenger rode in through the snow, panting like a greyhound. He handed you a sealed scroll. Lady Isabel requires immediate assistance with her pet monkey. You wrote out, confused and cold, and arrived to find a tiny primate with a fur knot tangled into what looked like a miniature man bun. Your task: untangle it. You did, with 2 fingers and a lot of patience. The monkey bit you. Lady Isabel applauded like you'd saved her firstborn. You still have the scar. You've noticed that nobles fear the same things everyone else does: sickness, shame, aging. They just have more gold to throw at it. More creams, more poultices, more requests for subtle improvements. You once spent an hour painting a nobleman's scalp with walnut dye so he'd appear less bald during a feast. He was thrilled. Then it rained. He wasn't thrilled anymore. Back in your shop, you keep a little ledger of noble visits. Not for the money, though yes, they do pay better, but for the stories. The absurdity. The times you've stitched up a duke's falcon, or applied leeches to a viscount's elbow just in case. You never know what you'll be asked to do next. That unpredictability keeps you sharp. Or, more likely, constantly anxious. Still, you wouldn't trade it. Nobles may be demanding, but they bring prestige. And prestige means more customers. People love to say my barber once worked on a count. They never mention it was for a boil on the count's backside. And you don't correct them. Let them imagine you shaping royal sideburns in candlelit grandeur. Let them forget the blood and the pus and the monkey bite. Besides, you still have that tiny velvet pouch of coins Lady Isabel gave you. Inside is a tiny golden charm shaped like a monkey. You don't wear it. But you keep it in your pocket when the day gets long, just to remind yourself, at least today, you didn't have to cut bangs for a baboon. Most mornings start the same. You unlatch the shutters, let in the grimy half-light, and brush the rat droppings off your bench. The coals from last night are dead, but you prod them anyway, just in case they're faking. You stretch your arms until your elbows pop and whisper something vaguely encouraging to the scissors soaking in vinegar. Then, you begin heating water for the day's shaves. Your tools are everything. You treat them like friends you trust more than people. There's the slim iron lancet with a chipped hilt, good for veins, not for delicate noses. A crooked pair of shears that always stick on damp hair. A favorite razor that hums when it glides right, and bites when you rush it. And your most prized item, a tiny curved knife you call Gentle Annie. Not because she's gentle, but because you hope one day she will be. Tools are expensive. You can't just pop down to the market for a fresh set. Some were gifts from old mentors. Others you inherited from barbers who went out of business, or out of life. You clean them obsessively. You sharpen them on the same stone you've used for years, though it's now more memory than grit. Every nick in the steel has a story, every handle bears the grime of desperate fingers. You have no fancy jars or labeled drawers like the apothecaries. Instead, your salves are kept in reused pottery cups, wax stoppered to keep flies out. One is for skin, honey, thyme, maybe a drop of rendered goose fat. Another is for wounds, wine thickened with powdered bark. You sniff them each morning, as though they'll whisper their ingredients back to you if you're gentle enough. The leeches live in a bowl under your counter. You try not to name them anymore. It makes things complicated. But one of them, large, sluggish, stubborn, still gets called Jeffrey when you're feeling sentimental. Clients don't love the sight of them, but they love their reputation. They draw out the bad blood, you explain, as if Jeffrey has a moral compass. Then there's your workspace. It's not much. A single room with a window that doesn't quite close, a bench that groans under the weight of every nervous bottom, and a mirror polished enough to reflect regret. You hang herbs from the rafters, mostly to hide the smell. Sometimes you light rosemary and pretend it's to cleanse the air, not to mask last week's boil. Your hands are your real tools. They're always busy. Washing, binding, stitching. They're cracked in winter, blistered in summer, and stained year-round with a palette of humanity you don't talk about. You've gotten good at hand-washing in cold water, using sand when there's no soap. You flick your fingers dry like a chef in a rush and wipe them on your apron without thinking. And speaking of aprons, yours is a mess. It used to be white. Now it's historical. A living record of years of work, mostly in shades of brown and unfortunate red. Some clients ask why you don't get a new one. You explain that if they see a spotless apron, it means you haven't worked that day. Or worse, that you're new. Every so often, an official wanders in. Someone from the guild, maybe, or a town clerk checking licenses. You smile, offer a cup of lukewarm broth, and make polite conversation while subtly nudging your more suspicious ingredients out of view. You don't have a license, not really. But you do have the respect of most of the neighborhood, and the mayor's favorite cousin still has both ears thanks to you. Midday is the quiet time. You wipe down the chair, sit by the window, and take your only real break. You nibble on a hunk of bread and cheese, maybe a wrinkled apple if you're lucky. You listen to the clatter of carts outside, the gossip drifting from the baker's wife 2 doors down, and the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer. And you think, this is the part no one writes about. The lull. The warmth. The sense that, for a moment, your little shop is the center of the world. And in a way, it is. People come here with pain. With secrets. With bald spots and bruised egos. They come to be cleaned, to be seen, to feel, for just a moment, like someone is in control. You are the keeper of appearances, the mender of men, the last resort before the apothecary or the priest. You've patched up street fighters and nervous brides, soothed cranky merchants and weeping widows. You've painted freckles with crushed berries for superstitious children, and powdered feet for dancers who swore they had cursed shoes. You once braided a drunk monk's beard into the shape of a swan. He tipped you in walnuts and a song about St. Cuthbert's kneecaps. Historians still argue whether medieval barbers were truly respected or just tolerated. The truth is, you're a little of both. Respected when things go well, tolerated when they don't. But always needed. Always busy. And always one day away from having to sharpen gentle Annie again. As the afternoon sun slides across the crooked shelf that holds your herbs, you start your cleaning ritual. Wipe the bench. Rinse the basins. Sort your tools like you're setting them down for bed. You mutter to yourself. A little rhyme you made up years ago: knife and comb, bowl and bone, lay them down and leave them lone. Tomorrow will bring new faces. New lumps. New terrible hair decisions. But for now, the tools are resting. And so are you. Now, not every client you serve is there for a shave or a haircut. No, sometimes they come in clutching their stomach, or holding a handkerchief full of teeth. Other times they just stumble in looking like they've lost a fight with gravity and possibly a pig cart. That's when your role shifts, from barber to makeshift healer. No white coat. No ceremony. Just you, your tools, and a strong stomach. Let's talk about bloodletting. You know how it goes. People get too hot, too cold, too sad, or too spotty, and the answer always seems to be, let's let some blood out and see what happens. It's not your idea. It's centuries of tradition wrapped in a thin veil of logic. Bad humors, they say. Imbalance in the body. Too much blood, and suddenly you're angry all the time or dreaming about frogs. Easy fix: find a vein, open it gently, and let nature do the rest. You've done it hundreds of times. Some clients insist on a bowl, others prefer it to drip quietly onto straw. Some faint. Some talk non-stop to distract themselves, usually about the weather or taxes. One man, as you drew blood from his arm, calmly recited every saint he knew. Alphabetically. You'd barely reached H before you had to clamp off the vein and hand him a biscuit, but bloodletting isn't the only treatment in your kit. There's cupping, too. You heat a small glass dome, or a hollowed-out horn, if you're going rustic, and place it against the skin. As the air cools, it creates suction, drawing the skin into a nice, blotchy swell. Supposedly, it pulls out the badness. In reality, it mostly leaves people looking like they've lost a game of medieval Twister. But they swear by it. Then there's your herbal remedies. You don't call yourself an apothecary, of course. That's a whole other guild with a whole lot more scrolls. But you do dabble. A bit of chamomile in warm wine for sleeping troubles. Crushed mint and vinegar for headaches. Dried nettles soaked in oil for joint pain. You've even experimented with ground oyster shell for melancholy of the chest, though that mostly resulted in burping and regret. One of your regulars, a blacksmith named Margot, comes in every month for nerve powder. You mix it fresh while she waits, grinding rose petals, sage, and a touch of soot into a fine dust. She sprinkles it under her tongue and claims it helps her dream of flying. You suspect it mostly helps her forget she spends all day swinging hammers. Sometimes the healing gets more physical. Dislocated shoulders, twisted ankles, mystery lumps. You've learned the art of binding with linen and muttered confidence. You've splinted fingers with carved wood and rabbit sinew. You once drained a boil on a baker's thigh that was roughly the size of a small quail. Neither of you have been the same since, but the teeth, that's where things get grim. Toothache brings out the worst in people. They arrive wild-eyed, clutching their jaws, willing to trade anything for relief. You inspect the offender, a molar-turned-traitor, perhaps, and explain their options. Option 1, a poultice. Clove and wine. Temporary. Option 2, extraction. Quick, painful, final. You use your tooth key, a brutal little iron crank that grips the tooth and twists. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it shatters the tooth and you spend an hour fishing out the bits. One woman bit you mid-extraction. Drew blood. You still have the scar. You kept the tooth as a reminder, never trust a quiet client. You've tried to make the process gentler. Warm rags. Singing softly. Even a bit of homemade poppy syrup for those who can afford the drowsiness. But there's only so much comfort you can offer when you're yanking bones out of someone's skull, and yet, they thank you. With coin, with eggs, with strange tokens. A man once gave you a bracelet made of woven goat hair. Another offered a blessing from his brother, who was a monk and, allegedly, on speaking terms with an angel. You hang those odd gifts around the shop. A charm here, a sprig of dried lavender there. Not because you believe they work, necessarily, but because they remind you that people trust you. With their faces, their bodies, their fears. They come to you when they don't know what else to do, and you do your best. You study. You experiment. You listen to the whispers of older barbers, the rumors from travelers, the odd wisdom buried in old scrolls passed between hands like secret prayers. You're part of a chain that stretches back centuries, all the way to ancient surgeons and monks with scalpels carved from bone. Some days, it weighs on you. The responsibility. The mess. The constant balancing act between healer and pretender. You think of the mistakes, small ones, big ones, the ones you can't forget. The child whose fever never broke. The merchant whose cut festered despite your best oils. The sailor who coughed blood and smiled anyway. You light a candle for them. Quietly. No ritual, no fuss. Just a flicker of flame, a moment of stillness in a world that rarely stops, and then someone knocks. Another client. Another complaint. Another life leaning gently, Hopefully, into your care, you stand, crack your neck, and reach for your apron. By now, you've probably figured out that being a barber in medieval times wasn't all about trimming beards and ladling out leeches. It was also a matter of presence, of holding space, listening closely, and pretending you weren't deeply alarmed by the rash now colonizing someone's ear. But here's something not everyone talks about: your shop is also a stage. Yes, you perform. Daily. Hourly. You have your script, your props, your lighting, natural, but still carefully considered. And most importantly, you have your audience. They arrive weary, wary, and often just a touch dramatic. You respond with a knowing smile and an encouraging "let's have a look, shall we?" before plunging them into a small whirlwind of reassurance. Ritual, and low-level agony, you've learned to read people quickly. The ones who need gentle distraction, you give a steady stream of chatter. Did you hear about the cow that escaped the abbey? You'll say, while you're realigning a dislocated thumb. Swam across the river. Swore it was heading for France. Others prefer silence. Those you treat with exaggerated calm. Each movement slow and ceremonial. A cloth laid here. A bowl set there. Your presence becomes the treatment as much as the salve or the knife, and then there are the storytellers. You love them most. They sit in your chair and begin mid-sentence, as though you've just stepped back into a tale they've been spinning for years. And that's when I realized the pig was wearing the bishop's ring. They declare, while you clean a scab shaped like Italy. You nod, you laugh, you file it away for later. These stories are your real currency. More than coin, more than favors. You collect them greedily. Tales of fish that cried, of dreams that came true, of curses narrowly avoided by hopping backwards while holding one's breath. Some are nonsense. Most, actually. But they fill the air with a richness no herb ever could. You repeat the best ones to other clients, altering the details for flair. A man came in last week, you say, with a goose that could count to 7. Only in Latin, though. No one questions you. They want to believe. You want to believe. In this strange world of half medicine and half theater, belief is the thread holding it all together, and it's not just the stories, they come for the gossip too. Your shop, modest as it is, sits at the crossroads of every secret worth knowing. Who's marrying whom, who's secretly dying, who's gotten rich off of fermented turnips. You hear it all. Not because you ask, but because people speak freely when their mouths are open for examination or full of gauze. You become a confessor, in a way. They share their fears with you, fear of aging, of illness, of being unloved. "I think my wife only married me for my cheese," one man whispered while you cleaned a head wound. You nodded solemnly and suggested he test this by hiding the cheese for a week. Sometimes, someone will cry. Quietly. Into the cloth you press against their jaw. They'll apologize. You'll say, "It's just the sting of the salve." Even if there was no salve, you carry all this in you. You don't write it down, but it shapes your hands. Your voice. The way you touch a shoulder before you lance a blister. You're more than a barber. You're part shaman, part sponge, part safety net in a world without much of one. Of course, not everyone appreciates the performance. Some treat you like furniture with scissors. They bark their requests, frown at your prices, and act like bloodletting is some minor inconvenience you created for fun. You let them. You smile. And the next time they're on your bench with a boil that looks like it's about to achieve sentience, you remember. But even then, you serve them. You don't get to pick and choose. Not really. Not when your whole profession is built on trust and fear, and the unspoken promise that no matter what comes through that door, you'll do your best. And then there are the children. they arrive squirming and suspicious, clutching a guardian's leg like it's the mast of a sinking ship. You know better than to coax. Instead, you let them explore. You offer a wooden comb, a squishy bit of soap shaped like a duck, a story about the ghost that lives in your basin but only tickles toes. They watch you like a hawk, and if you're lucky, they sit still long enough for a haircut that only slightly resembles a hedgehog caught in a storm. Parents thank you afterward, sometimes with actual money, sometimes with dried apples. You appreciate both. You once had a boy who screamed at the sight of your scissors, but after 3 visits and a few traded jokes, he now stops by just to sweep the floor and tell you about frogs. These tiny victories matter, because this isn't a job you take for prestige. No one dreams of being a medieval barber. They stumble into it, usually because someone older died too soon, or because they weren't good at farming, or because they had a steady hand and weren't squeamish around pus, but you've made it into something more. A place. A rhythm. A quiet corner of the town where people can sit, exhale, and feel like someone, just one person, knows what they're doing, and if that person happens to be you, apron crusted, hair in your mouth, and hands stained with herbs and hope. Well, there are worse ways to be remembered. Sometimes, on quiet mornings, before your first client stumbles in, you sit by the little window in your shop and just listen to the birds arguing about crumbs, to the distant clang of hooves on cobblestone, to the rising grumble of a world waking up, sore and skeptical. You sip something vaguely warm, herbal, likely, or yesterday's wine diluted into tea, and take stock of your hands, of your tools, of your place in this curious, muddled town. You didn't start out knowing what you were doing. Your early days were a mess. You once tried to cut hair with a kitchen knife. You used soap made from rendered pig fat that left people smelling like stew. You read an herbal recipe backwards and ended up dyeing a man's beard an aggressive shade of green. He said he didn't mind. His wife, however, refused to speak to him for a week. You've come a long way since then. Your razors now have proper edges. Your oils don't smell like despair. You've even carved your own tools from antler and horn, odd-looking, but effective. One resembles a duck's beak and somehow pulls splinters better than anything else. You keep them lined up on your little shelf, each with a name only you know, the Persuader, Lady Bicker, the Whisper Spoon. Tools are like pets, they respond better when treated with personality. And then there's your chair. Oh, the chair. She creaks, she leans, she occasionally bites fingers if you're not careful. But she's held everything. Crying babies, hungover nobles, a goat once, don't ask. You've repaired her a dozen times with whatever you had on hand, twine, bone pegs, a leftover hinge from someone's outhouse. She still holds firm. Mostly, but your pride and joy. Your mirror. It's cracked in one corner and fogged at the edges, but it was a gift. A traveling priest traded it for your holy healing oil, which was, in truth, just rosemary steeped in gin. He said it showed people's true selves. You've since watched countless expressions in it: joy, embarrassment, fear, admiration. Once, a man winked at himself for a full minute. You had to politely cough to remind him you were there. Around the mirror, you've pinned little keepsakes, drawings from children, pressed flowers, feathers, notes that simply say thank you. These are your trophies. Your proof that you matter. In a world that often forgets those who stand behind others, you've made yourself unforgettable in the smallest, most sincere ways. Of course, you still make mistakes. You once shaved half a man's mustache before realizing he only wanted a trim. You offered him a lopsided smile and a discount. Another time, you confused 2 herbal mixtures and accidentally gave a woman a paste meant for hoof rot. She came back the next day, skin glowing, asking for more. You now call it beauty bomb number 1 and charge extra, but those are the better kinds of mistakes, the sort you can laugh about later. The harder ones stay quiet. The cut too deep. The fever you couldn't break. The boy who vanished from town before you could finish treating his leg. You carry those silently, packed into the back room of your mind like unopened letters. That room is full, but you keep walking forward, because every day, someone new steps through your door with a story you haven't heard, a face you haven't seen, a wound you haven't tried to heal. And you offer what you always offer, your skill, your kindness, your chair, and, when needed, a quiet moment with no judgment. You've even begun teaching, a little. Informally. An orphan girl from the edge of town sweeps your floor in exchange for apprentice knowledge. You show her how to hold scissors, how to grind herbs, how to smile even when the job smells like wet socks and goat cheese. She listens, fiercely. You like that, she'll outgrow your shop one day. You hope so, and if someone else walks into your door, bleeding, broken, or just needing a quiet haircut to feel human again, well, you'll be here. You'll keep the fire warm, the chair ready, the tools clean, because barbers aren't just barbers. Not in this time. Not in this town. You're a bit of everything, tailor of faces, collector of secrets. Mender of hurts both big and small, and if that sounds noble, don't worry, it still comes with its fair share of nose hair trimming and ear wax extractions. You're not about to float off on a cloud of destiny, but maybe, just maybe, you've made a place in the world where people feel a little less alone. And that, in the grand swirl of medieval nonsense, is something to be proud of. You're heating your blade again, not because someone's asked for a shave, though that'll come, but because, for the 15th time this month, you're preparing to drain someone's elbow of a mysterious, warm lump that's been humming with evil. You don't question the description anymore, instead, you move slowly. Warm the blade. Drape the cloth. Talk about the weather or the latest argument between the baker and the gravedigger. Anything to keep your client's mind from drifting too far into the what-ifs. As the heat curls the edge of your knife, you can't help but think about the philosophy behind all this. Behind you, because historians still argue whether barbers were respected community figures or simply tolerated out of necessity. It's one of those debates that refuses to settle, like whether medieval bread caused dreams or if goats can truly recognize royalty. Some say you were honored, needed, even, because you stepped in when others refused. You treated wounds, you birthed babies, you stitched flesh. A necessary cog in the clunky wheel of health, others say you were feared. Resented, even. Associated with pain, superstition, and strange smells. The one they ran to when all else failed, but rarely invited to dinner. You think the truth is somewhere in between, you're the middle path. Not quite priest, not quite doctor. Not fully peasant, not truly noble. You're a liminal figure, a bridge between discomfort and comfort. Between sickness and the hope that something, anything, might help, and that has power. It's why you've developed little rituals. Things you do not for science, but for trust. A prayer whispered over the bowl of leeches. A thumb rubbed 3 times over the handle of your razor before it touches skin. Not because you believe in magic, but because your clients might. And sometimes, that belief does more good than any salve. Even your shop reflects this in-between-ness. Your walls are cluttered with contradictions. There's a saint's figurine next to a jar of pickled onions. A horseshoe over the door and a drawing of a liver-spotted owl pinned to a beam, because someone once told you they bring precision. You have no idea if that's true. But the owl stays. You've even got a diagram of the human body that you copied from a traveling scholar, though it's more guesswork than anatomy. The organs are labeled things like spirit sac and hot bile channel, but your clients are impressed, so it earns its spot. And what about the barber pole? Ah yes. You fashioned your own. A crude thing made from a broomstick and scraps of dyed cloth, red and white. Of course. Red for blood, white for bandages. It spins slightly in the wind, squeaking like a sleepy bird. It's more symbol than sign. A silent declaration, healing and hurt live here together. You remember once asking a visiting monk if barbers would be remembered. He squinted at you and said, if there is a future, and if it has history, then yes. You'll be in the margins. You nodded, unsure whether that was a compliment, but maybe that's fitting. The margins are where you live, after all. You work beside the big stories, the loud ones, battles and kings, saints and scandals. You're not the center, but you're there, patching up the fallout, stitching closed the side effects. And the funny thing is, that suits you. You'd rather be in the room after the hero rides off, tending to the squire's sprained ankle, cutting the cook's corns, whispering you did your best to a man who just lost a tooth and a little dignity. You know what people look like when they stop pretending. It happens when the armor comes off, when the mask slips, when the wound starts to throb. And somehow, you're the one they turn to. That's no small thing, of course. You're still occasionally mistaken for a butcher. One time, a visiting merchant came in asking for 3 pounds of flank and didn't blink when you offered him a salve for gout. Only later did he realize his error, and buy the salve anyway. Said it worked wonders on his mule's hooves. You're not offended. Much. But you do keep a jar labeled meat not for sale just in case, and now, as your client winces and grips the edge of the chair, you press the warm blade into his skin with the kind of practice grace that only comes from doing it 100 times before. There's a hiss, a small gasp, and then the strange release of something that probably shouldn't be in a person's elbow. You don't ask what it was. Neither does he. Instead, you offer him the clean rag, pour a little vinegar over the wound, and say, "You're looking better already." You've said that line more times than you can count. But that's the point. Repetition comforts. Predictability heals in its own quiet way, and after he's gone, walking a bit lighter, promising to send his cousin, you clean the blade, scrub the chair, and turn the mirror slightly toward the window so it catches a bit of light. The day isn't over. You've still got 3 more appointments and a walk down to the stream for fresh water. But for now, you lean back, stretch your aching fingers, and let the silence settle in like warm cloth. Because here, in this small pocket of the world, you matter. Not loudly. Not famously. But enough, and that's all you ever really wanted. You wake to the low murmur of the town stirring, the smell of damp earth and baking bread drifting through your window. You rub your eyes, already thinking of the day ahead. It's not just about the cuts and the leeches today. No, today is the day of the guild meeting. The Barber Surgeon Guild is a peculiar institution, part club, part obligation. It's where you gather with your peers, the few other folks who share your trade and trials, to discuss everything from the best herbs for soothing bruises to the latest rumors of plague creeping in from the east. You dress carefully, brushing your hair back with a comb carved from boxwood, something smooth and familiar, before stepping out. The streets are alive with the usual hustle, merchants hawking their goods, children darting between stalls, and the occasional clatter of a dropped bucket or scolding voice from a passing mother. At the guild hall, you find familiar faces. Some are grizzled veterans, their hands rough and stories longer than your patience on a slow day. Others are younger apprentices, eager and wide-eyed, clutching their tools like talismans. The meeting begins with a ritual, a kind of solemn acknowledgement of the work you all share. It's not just about bloodletting or hair cutting, it's about the trust placed in you, the awkward intimacy of the work, the shared weight of being both healer and, sometimes, harbinger of discomfort. You discuss new techniques, trade warnings about certain plants that caused more harm than good, and share tales that would make an outsider's skin crawl but somehow make you feel less alone. There's talk of a new ointment made from comfrey and honey, said to heal wounds faster. Someone mentions a recent scandal where a barber was accused of stealing coins from a noble's purse during a shave. The room bursts into quiet laughter, the tension easing. You raise your hand to tell about the boy who returned to sweep your floor, a small victory in a world often indifferent. The room nods in understanding. These moments matter as much as any cure. As the meeting winds down, you feel a strange kinship with these people. You share not just a trade but a calling of sorts, muddled and messy but meaningful. Outside, the sun is higher, and the town continues its noisy, chaotic dance. You walk back to your shop, the familiar creak of the door greeting you like an old friend. You prepare your tools, arranging them carefully, ready to face another day of cuts, conversations, and quiet heroism, because that's what you are. A small light in the swirl of medieval life, and tomorrow, you'll do it all again. The afternoon settles softly as you prepare for your last client, a farmer with a crooked smile and a stubborn cough that's lasted since winter. His hands are rough like bark, his clothes dusted with soil and sweat. He sits down without much fuss, trusting you enough to let his guard down. You start with the usual ritual: warm cloth to his face, gentle strokes with the razor, careful trimming of overgrown hair tangled with bits of straw and hay. He sighs, a sound halfway between relief and resignation, as the sharp edge moves methodically. Then comes the real work. You examine his cough, pressing lightly around his chest, asking questions between quiet moments. He speaks in short bursts, telling stories about the land, the stubborn mule, the recent rains that didn't come. You mix a poultice from willow bark and beeswax, explaining its purpose as you work. The scent is earthy and sweet, a small comfort against the underlying worry in his eyes. You apply it carefully, wrapping the cloth around his chest with practiced hands. There's a pause. The world outside your shop window seems to slow, children's laughter fading, the clatter of cartwheels distant now. You think about how many people like him you've helped, not with grand miracles but with simple, steady care. How many have come with aches and fears, leaving a little lighter, a little braver. The farmer leans back, closing his eyes for a moment. You can almost see the weight lift, if only for a while. This is the quiet strength of your work, the small acts of kindness stitched between blades and bandages. As he leaves, you notice the sun dipping lower, casting long shadows across the dusty floor. You clean your tools once more, the ritual familiar and grounding. Tomorrow will bring more of the same, more faces, more stories, more small battles fought in the silence, and that's enough. Evening wraps around the town like a soft blanket, the air cooling and settling into a gentle hush. You sit by your small hearth, the flickering flames casting lazy shadows across the worn wooden walls of your shop. The day's dust still clings faintly to your skin, mingling with the faint scent of herbs and vinegar that seems to have become part of you. You think about the rhythms of this life, the unpredictability balanced by routine, the constant dance between discomfort and relief. You remember the times you've held trembling hands, whispered reassurances, and watched as a simple haircut or a carefully applied salve lifted spirits. Even if just a little. You pull out your worn notebook. Pages smudged and dog-eared, filled with sketches of tools, recipes for remedies, and notes on clients whose stories have stayed with you. There's the old woman who swore by your lavender oil to ease her restless nights, the child who laughed through tears after you fixed his split lip, the stranger who left a coin and a prayer when he couldn't speak. Each name is a thread in the tapestry of your days, reminder that behind every wound is a story worth hearing. You prepare your tools for the next day, sharpening blades and mixing ointments, the motions familiar and soothing. Outside, the stars begin to peek through the deepening sky, their steady glow a quiet companion. Historians still argue whether barbers truly shaped medieval life or simply survived it. But you know your truth is quieter, softer. It's in the moments you mend, the trust you build, the calm you bring. As the fire dwindles to embers, you lean back, letting the gentle warmth seep into your tired bones. Tomorrow awaits with its unpredictable stories and steady needs, but for now, the world is still. You close your eyes, letting the soft shadows carry you toward rest. The night deepens, and you find yourself standing outside your shop, the cool air brushing against your skin. The streets are empty now, save for the occasional hoot of an owl or the distant bark of a dog. The quiet feels like a gift, a rare pause in a life usually filled with noise and movement. You look up at the sky, where stars twinkle like pinpricks of light against the velvet darkness. It's hard to imagine that just a few centuries from now, people will gaze at these same stars with telescopes and charts, unlocking secrets you could only dream of. Tonight, though, your thoughts wander back to the small wonders of your own world, the scent of fresh herbs, the feel of a warm cloth against skin, the soft murmur of a grateful sigh after a difficult procedure. You think about the journey that brought you here, to this humble shop, this delicate balance of pain and healing. The path wasn't easy, long hours, grim tasks, and the ever-present shadow of doubt from those who questioned your role. But in those quiet moments, when the razor slips just so or a poultice begins to take effect, you find a kind of peace. A knowledge that, despite the hardships, you are part of something important. You step back inside, closing the door softly behind you. The flickering candlelight dances on the walls, casting gentle patterns that soothe the mind. You sit by the window, sipping a small cup of chamomile tea. Its warmth spreading slowly through your body. The taste is mild, comforting, a simple pleasure after a day filled with so many sharp edges. As you prepare to rest, you remind yourself that this life, with all its imperfections and challenges, has its own quiet beauty. The stories you carry, the hands you've held, the lives you've touched, they are the true legacy of the barber, and with that thought, your eyelids grow heavy, the world fades softly around you, and you drift toward sleep, wrapped in a gentle embrace of the night. You sense the tides turning long before the final blow is struck. It begins with whispered talk of universities teaching physicians new techniques, anatomy lectures on cadavers, texts in Latin instead of scribbled guild manuals. You watch as young men in black gowns stroll past your shop, heads full of theories about humeral balance and sterile procedures, terms you've only half heard in passing. The pole outside still squeaks, but fewer people stop. They've glimpsed a ledger of fresh knowledge and think twice before trusting a man whose closest ally is a leech. It's subtle at first. A traveler from the capital brings word of a new instrument, an iron clamp designed specifically for tooth extraction. Rather than your battered pelican, a local apothecary sets up shop with glass jars and printed labels, promising scientific remedies. You try to smile as you bandage the apothecary's apprentice after a botched distillation, but inside you feel a chill. Your world is shifting, you continue your work, still opening veins and stitching scalps, still mixing poultices in chipped bowls. You cling to tradition because it has served you and your forebears so well. Yet every time you clean your mirror, you catch a reflection that feels out of place, your tired eyes framed by a face that has seen too many desperate gazes. The same face that once brimmed with confident delight now carries a quiet question: what happens when no one needs you anymore? Guild meetings grow sparse. The hall, once crowded with the clank of tools and low laughter, echoes with empty benches. Younger barbers complain of dwindling fees, some abandon the trade altogether, apprenticing instead under university-trained surgeons who wield scalpels with studied precision. You hear stories of countries banning barbers from performing certain procedures, reserving them only for haircuts and mustache trims. The golden age of barber surgeons is fading into memory. Historians still argue whether the decline was inevitable once formal medicine found its footing or if it could have been slowed by barbers embracing new methods. Some claim your guild could have prospered alongside physicians, adapting instruments and techniques. Others insist you clung too tightly to the old ways, leech jars and lancets, when antiseptics and anatomy diagrams beckon. You don't join the debate. You keep your hands busy, because idle hands are prone to anxious thoughts, patients drift away in trickles. A noble visits once more, curious at first, but sends his servant next time. The servant's servant after that. You find yourself trimming stray hairs for free, hoping familiarity might keep you in mind. But when he sneezes a bitter cough, he seeks out a new surgeon who boasts of bloodless operations and pain-numbing salves. You watch as word of mouth becomes rumor and rumor becomes dismissal, your tools gather dust. Gentle Annie hangs unused on the wall. The leech bowl sits empty, its moss decayed. You polish the razor, but only once a week now, when you remember. You fill a new ledger page with practice sketches rather than client names, doodles of surgical clamps and strange pulleys you saw in a scholar's book. You imagine reconfiguring your workshop into something modern, if only you had the coin, but coin is scarce. You barter scissors for bread. Trade bandages for ale. You patch your chair with scraps of leather until it splinters beneath you one morning, forcing you to sit on a low stool. It creaks in protest, perhaps echoing your own. One afternoon, a young woman wanders in, curious about the old barber's shop she's heard of in bedtime stories. She asks if you still perform extractions. You admire her determination, then hand her a mirror and scissors. Trim your own bangs, you say gently. She tries, snips uneven locks, and laughs. The sound is bright and kind, and for a moment you feel the warmth of purpose again, but as dusk falls, she leaves, scissors dangling at her side. The pole outside casts a long shadow across the dusty floor. You close the shutters, extinguish the candle, and breathe in the lingering scent of your years, the tang of metal, the faint sweetness of dried lavender, the old warmth of oil. You lock the door behind you and step into the empty street. The world whispers that you're obsolete, a relic of a bygone era. Yet you carry in your bones the memory of 1,000 small restorations, the breath returned, the wound soothed, the hair tamed. That legacy won't vanish with a stroke of a scalpel in a distant university. You linger for a moment under the barber pole, its cloth ribbon stiff in the night breeze. And then you walk home, tools untouched, thoughts drifting to a future you can barely imagine. Your hands are quiet now, though the memory of the tool's weight lingers, a soft echo in your fingertips. The chanting bustle of the town has settled into a gentle murmur, like distant waves caressing a shore at twilight. In this calm, you feel each breath slow, each heartbeat soften, and you know that tomorrow will bring new tasks, perhaps fewer than before, but tasks nonetheless. Let the day's tension slip away, like warm water through cupped hands, leaving only the trace warmth of effort and care. Imagine the lantern's glow easing to a hushed glow, the shadows on your walls lengthening and then fading, until only a gentle gray remains. Picture the chair in your shop, its wood grain smoothing under the hush of night. Waiting patiently for the morning light. Feel the faint creak of hinges settling into rest, the soft rustle of cloth as each ribbon on the pull drifts to stillness. Breathe in the faint scent of herbs, lavender, rosemary, mint, lingering in the air, soothing and steady. Let your mind drift across seasons you've known, the bright promise of spring's first buds, the lazy warmth of summer afternoons, the crisp chill of autumn mornings. Allow each memory to wash over you like a feather's touch, light and unhurried. You have stitched, you have soothed, you have trimmed away fears and hair alike. Even as the world shifts and your role changes, this truth remains: you offered comfort with every careful movement. And that care, once given, lives on in each calm breath, each softened sigh. Now, close your eyes. Feel the quiet settle in like a blanket. Drift toward sleep, where pain diminishes, and dreams take flight. Tomorrow's dawn is gentle, with new stories to share and small kindnesses to bestow. For now, rest. Sweet dreams.